Well, I just like.
So, follow up?
Mm.
Do we have any follow up? We kind of are in this space where we are recording before we release the first episode. So it's a secret.
Right.
It's kind
Right.
of kind of like we're the only ones who know about it right now.
Oh, I suppose that's true. Like, if we follow up, we could just like. Well, no. Well, this will be the second, so it's like it'll already be spoiled. So I can say, we talked about obsessions, which is our main topic, for probably like 5% of the topic time.
Yeah, it's true. We did tend to go all over the place, but I think that's okay. It makes it interesting. So I thought you wanted to talk about productivity.
We've been getting up to do a couple of episodes right now, or for podcasts, I guess. And it's one of those things that like I tend to think about every now and then is like how much I'm consuming versus how much I'm producing because I'm definitely a consumer mostly.
It's I think it's really important to create as well as consume. I think you can't get away with not consuming more. I think like that's pretty inevitable just because of like the media that exists out there and how much time you have to put into a project. At least I mean if you're a content creator and that's your job, that's maybe different.
Well, I mean, like even if you think of like something like education, I mean, like education is basically consuming knowledge, and you can't say that it's not valuable. So consumption definitely has like a really significant value to like your human experience, and also basically what you can create afterwards. Like you can't create music if you don't somehow like consume the knowledge of how to play. Although there is a sort of organic, just fiddling around with stuff. But
Right.
there's definitely value to consuming. It's
Right.
just one of those things that like if you think about, well, it's okay. Let's talk about your obsession, Harry Potter, or like something like video games, right? There's kind of the thing of like where you get a lot out of it, and then like you get still a lot out of it, but like by the time that you've done it for like 40 times, you might not get as much about it. They have like this whole theory of diminishing returns. And I don't find it so much true with books, but definitely with movies or video games or something like that.
Hmm.
Like once you've played the game, beat the boss, and now you're grinding away on level 59 only to grind away on level 60. It's like you're not really getting much out of it at that point.
I totally agree. I mean, like, yeah, like exactly like you said, the books you can get more out of, but even then, the first time you read or consume something is definitely different than like the next time because you just don't have any concept of what that thing will be like, and it's generally like if it's a good thing, it's awesome the first time, and yeah, you don't get the whole thing the second time around.
Yeah, and if you even think about stuff like I think it's like kind of a really healthy thing to do is like just consume media from other cultures as well. Like where like if you watch American media, um, like for a while, like you do have sort of a diminishing return on the type of sort of cultural experience you have, whereas you will actually pick up more cultural information if you go and watch like a Japanese game show, which are freaking crazy, or
Yeah,
listen to a K-pop band or something like that.
right. I was thinking Spanish soap operas, but
The telenovelas, kind of thing.
yeah, yeah.
Oh man.
Those I don't really watch those myself. One
Well,
reason is I don't exactly speak Spanish or like you're saying Japanese for other stuff. So you don't get as much out of it if you don't know the language.
Yeah, and like, well, there's like more and more online programs right now that basically can teach you a second language, and we've been looking at that. Like, we're pretty interested in like trying out Chinese because we bought Rosetta
Hmm.
Stone for Chinese, and we worked through, or at least I did, for like about a year, the first year's worth of material, and then our computer died, so we were like, we don't really want to spend like $400 more for like Rosetta Stone and try to figure out all the licensing stuff. But trying to
I,
think of like that. There's a really wish I knew what it was off the top of my head, but there's an online foreign language program that's becoming really popular. That's kind of a
Duolingo.
name. Yeah, I think that's what it is. That sounds really familiar.
Hmm.
But like we tried out German since Christina has a German coworker that is a pretty interesting person. We thought we'd kind of make that connection, but
It's difficult if you're not living there. I don't think you really get a lot of information if you're not exposed to it constantly.
yeah, and there's definitely a case of immersion. However, like I've thought about like using Duolingo or something to like learn Japanese. That way I can then more thoroughly enjoy anime because I do like a wide variety of anime, and the Japanese are so quirky that
Yeah, there's a lot of nuance in their language.
Well, I don't know much about their language actually, but that's just because I don't know about it. But some of their anime does not fit Western preconceptions or sort of assumptions or things like that. And, they have a definite sort of Japanese humor can like be very wide and varied, and I
Yeah,
like that. Like I was thinking of like we've watched like the top. We've been watching like some YouTube videos on like top animes and stuff like that, trying to get ideas like where we want to go next with our anime watching and stuff like that.
which anime shows have you already watched that are like your favorite?
Okay, so off the top of my head, I really like a anime called Darker Than Black, and I really like the classic sort of Cowboy Bebop. I really enjoyed. There was one on Netflix that I thought was actually really cool, which is an anime called Yamada's First Time. What was really interesting about that is that Yamada's goal as a high school girl is to get over her sexual awkwardness by having sex with as many men as possible,
Ah,
which seems like a terrible, terrible idea. And of course, she fails to succeed in this because she's like really socially awkward despite the fact that she's a very pretty girl. But the fact is that by even getting like one boyfriend who happens to be like her very first boyfriend happens to be a really nice guy, that she kind of learns like that a relationship is more about like this whole sex thing, and there's a whole companionship and sharing your life with each other, and it's actually really really sweet. And
wow, I'm
I
kind of surprised.
Oh yeah, the whole premise though was the fact that she was gonna have sex with as many guys as possible, and of course it comes out to be sort of like this romantic commentary. It was like I said, I was really impressed with it. It was not what I was expecting.
Wow, I'm definitely gonna check that out, especially because it's on Netflix.
Like Hulu has quite a bit of anime, and but Hulu will post anime that is either subbed or dubbed or not at all. Like
Hmm.
almost all the anime is basically subbed or dubbed, but the stuff they put on Netflix tends to have a little bit better dubbing,
Okay.
and the stuff on Hulu like you can get some really bad subbed or dubbed anime
Yeah,
on Hulu.
yeah. We've been watching Veronica Mars lately.
I haven't seen that actually, and I heard it was really good. I kind of wanted to watch Gilmore Girls, but again, like I think both of the women in Gilmore Girls were both very attractive, and it kind of left me with that creep factor again, where I was like, these people are really interesting, but
I didn't have a problem. I didn't. I don't think I have a problem with Gilmore Girls. Like if you actually watch it,
mhm.
it's very high school show. There's a lot of different themes, and it's actually pretty varied in like topic and setting, and it's a really good show. It's probably not worth watching all of it. You'd probably want to go to some website that has said, "Okay, here's the episodes you should actually watch."
It's got to be better than Saved by the Bell or something like that, even though I like
Yes,
totally watched Saved by the Bell.
it's not a high school show. It's just the main character is in high school, so
Right.
that's
So there are a lot of themes that are.
yes, they're coming of age themes, and
Gotcha.
yeah. Veronica Mars is like this high school girl. It's also out of high school, and she's kind of like a mystery solver for cases that happen around her. I don't really know how to explain that. Her dad's like a private eye, so she has like that background. And
So it's like all murderers that mostly like theft
there's
and
there's
fraud and
one
stuff.
murder. There's one murder for the first season.
Okay. Well, because if it's sort of geared towards like someone in high school or younger age, you probably wouldn't want to have all violent crime being the.
Well, I don't know. They show some pretty graphic stuff. I don't know if it's geared toward. I mean, I guess it is geared more towards like high school age people. Obviously I'm beyond that stage, but I still enjoy the show.
Well, one of the coming of age shows that I really enjoyed was actually Switched at Birth. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
No, what's it
Um,
about?
It basically is about two babies that were switched at birth, but one of them was I forget what the condition is, where you basically get a bacterial infection, but it causes deafness.
Hmm.
And so the story is that like when they got switched and everything, they like lived their lives, but like at some point in like the one girl's past, like she got a bacterial infection and lost her hearing, so she's deaf. And so when and the one girl is like going through like sort of a separation and rebellion age of the family, and she swears that she's not really related to them, so she ends up going and having a DNA test and actually finds out that she is in fact not related to her parents. And of course she uses it as a stepping stone to rebel and wanting to find her true past and her mother and things like that, but then finds out that like really your upbringing, your raising actually has a very large impact. It's all not just nature. There's a lot of nurture to be had and stuff like that.
I'm glad. I was just about to ask that because I think it's really frustrating when the cliche of getting switched at birth, they only portray, you know, oh, it's all about nature, when really a huge part of humans and like what you know as a person comes from nurture.
Right, your experience and what you've taken in by those experiences, as well as perspective, and also your influence that parents and friends will have when they say, "Oh, that was cool" or "That was not cool."
Also, environment where what you eat and where you live affects your body. And
Yeah, they did. I mean, with the switched at birth thing, they definitely sort of portrayed the fact that one of the couples was well off because he was a former professional baseball player, so that he
mm,
basically was able to utilize his early income from his professional baseball career to kind of set him up so that he would be prosperous for his entire lifetime. So one family was really well off, and meanwhile the other one was struggling because his mother wanted to become a salon, a beautician, and it was kind of more of creative art based, and just hadn't really found a lot of money in that line of work, but still had a love for it. And so her it was kind of interesting because they displayed kind of her life as having like a different sort of value, in the sense that while she was not as monetarily as prosperous, she had a lot of there's a lot of creative endeavors, and it was a very sort of
valuable anyway.
yeah, good, really good upbringing, and like a lot of good things to be had just by sharing time together, and not always having all the goodies to distract from life.
So I googled it, and it does look high school age.
Yeah, it's definitely coming of age, and what I thought was really interesting is like sort of the tangential experience of just the portrayal of the deaf girl, and the fact that like it almost is you get a lot of experience with like what it would be like to be deaf and have deaf friends, and the sort of prejudices that you might experience and stuff like that. And of course it's very fictionalized, so it's really hard to take any sort of realistic experience. But one of Christina's aunts, or cousins, I guess her cousin is deaf, and this show
Hmm.
definitely kind of makes you want to learn American Sign Language just so that you're not really.
It's something that I've thought about a lot, of learning, just because it's valuable in other ways. So you could learn, like if you and Christina both learned it, or myself and Maggie learned it, you can basically communicate across the room or more quickly
Yeah.
without having to like shout, or without having to,
Yeah, and I definitely have that problem with Christina because she talks so softly. I'm really kind of a loud person, but like she'll want to say something to me, and I have to like basically walk like within 3 feet to like know what she's asking me or trying to say to me.
She is.
I've also thought of like there's a lot of parents that will teach their children sign language to better communicate because there's speech skills, the ability to actually manipulate,
Language.
yeah, like their tongues and their mouths and stuff like that. Like it takes quite a bit of vocal precision that really children are almost physically incapable of.
Hmm.
Like there's definitely a challenge, and kids have like different developmental rates and things like that.
Right, so they can
And
use
so,
sign language before they can actually speak.
right, yeah. So that's the thing, is that you teach them basic needs like potty or water, or that way you can get over a lot of the frustration and the crying and the temper tantrums that have to do with communication, because like kids will usually cry and make a big fuss if they just can't communicate their needs, and it's a real sort of a hassle.
Now, I learned on my own the alphabet,
Right.
and that's actually come in handy. I've encountered people where, like, I was trying to communicate with them and nobody really could, and, like, there wasn't any pen or paper around for them to write down, and, like, I asked them to spell it for me.
Yeah, and actually, the learning just the alphabet is super useful because in American Sign Language, you might have, like, let's say you're going to take your hand and move it horizontally across your body. That might mean three different words depending on what letter you have in your hand at the time.
Hmm. Hmm.
So knowing the alphabet is actually the first step of like spelling multiple words, because you can just like you only have to memorize one movement, but you can just change the letter that you shape your hand to.
Why would they not make sign language universal? Because that could just transcend languages.
Yeah, well, it's just like, there's a whole history of like language de franca, which is basically the sort of the Latin, and I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly, but it's the Latin terminology of the dominant language at the time, of which right now English is, and there's a big, but when it comes to universal language, it's like a big question whether or not Chinese will
Dominate.
become more prominent, right? And I can talk about that later, but anyway, as far as like universal language, like it would be actually really useful if, I mean, really they should probably teach sign language at the same time that they teach just okay, bat, ball, cat, dog, because really that wouldn't be that much more difficult to simply just insert a physical movement every time that you wanted to do that. So what you do is you'd write the letters, spell the letters in sign language, write the word and then sign the word. Like it just doesn't seem like it would be that much more difficult. It would add maybe 30 to 40% of the time, but that being said, you would include, you know, 5 to 10%. I don't know what the deaf ratio is like as far as demographically speaking, how much of the
Hmm.
populace is deaf. But the thing is that if you did that everywhere, and sign language can be easily done everywhere, then you could have sort of a universal language. And it's one of the things of globalization. It's interesting question to think about whether or not there will be a globally dominant language.
You could just teach please, help, thank you. Like please, thank you, and help. Because if everybody on Earth knew that, that would be really beneficial.
Yeah, but actually think that like really, I think what you'd really want to teach is probably like a 2-year-old's understanding of the world, because
Hmm.
something as simple as water, bathroom,
Those are important too.
like where is something, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Like You can probably get through like saying where is museum or something, like if you could just simply sign where is,
Well, I don't know how we're going to get that into the culture because that's certainly not going to happen in our current school system.
Oh no, yeah. That's totally different. That's a totally different topic.
Well, I was going to go there anyway.
Okay,
I was
yeah.
gonna say we could just talk about that. So, an argument has recently been presented to me, or I've become aware of it, which is that basically language in schools should just be taken out completely of the
Yeah.
curriculum, like in high school. Now, this might upset some people. So I want to preface it by saying I'm talking about strictly high school language course. Because if you ask anyone, and they've also done research, I'm sure, I'll probably have to find a research paper or something on this, but high school students don't remember the language that they were taught. They are not fluent in it if they remember any of it. And it's not useful. Like it's if you are in an immersion program where you start off doing that, that's different, of course. But almost almost always it's just not a useful tool. And so I think we could probably just, take it out of high school curriculum, maybe replace it with a cultural learning class or computer language.
Yeah, so it's difficult for me to like sort of counter this argument because I happen to kind of agree with it, but I definitely think like what would be the pros of our current English language system in high school, and what I can think of would be basically cultural exposure. It's like basically when you get in high school, they want to let you read Lord of the Fries, Lord of the Fries, right? Lord of the Flies.
Lord of the Fries.
It's
Would
like
you
super.
like me to supersize that?
I know it's like it's yeah. It kind of feels that way, doesn't it? But they want to lead you Lord of the Flies and Catcher in the Rye, and I'm trying to think of some of the other like the high school classic like Grapes of Wrath or something like that. But
Scarlet Letter, Tom Sawyer.
Scarlet Letter is so terrible. Actually, what's funny is Scarlet Letter is like one of the best out of the
Right,
bunch,
it
and
is,
it's still
but
bad.
it's. Oh, well, I had to read Huckleberry Finn. Did you have to read Huckleberry Finn?
Yeah, but let's just say that I think I cheated on it. I'm not really sure, but I'd already like seen the movie, and I think I'd already read it like in junior high because someone said that it was like I went through a period even in high school, which is this is atypical, where I felt like I wanted to read the classics, so I tried to read Robin Crusoe, and I didn't get anywhere with that, and I like read
Oh,
Huckleberry Finn, and
you are such a nerd. You just outed yourself really bad as a nerd.
it
You're
was a terrible experience. I wouldn't
like,
recommend anyone do it. If you think that you're going to better yourself by reading classics, just don't.
just avoid it.
Read somebody's like account of like the Punic Wars, or Julius Caesar and Gaul. That's like way more valuable. Or something like the rise and fall of the Roman Empire, or no, it's the decline and fall of the Roman Empire by I forget what his name is.
That's fine. I'll put a link in the notes.
Like if you're gonna read some classics, read like nonfiction. It's just way better. I haven't really read much of Charles Dickens, so I couldn't tell you that. And actually, I did get something out of like Jane Eyre and some of the more female authors that, of course, were not popular at the time because they were female, but actually their writing was tend to be superior than the men writing at the time, as far as fiction goes.
It's hard for me to read some of those because they're so dry.
They are really dry.
But yeah, I mean, there are classics, I think, for a reason. I think, there's something to be said about popular things being popular because they're popular.
Yeah, I noticed that recently, like high school, and I think that this is the right way to go. Is like as far as like high school education, like trying to make language like valuable. Like some of the high schools are trying to like put in like Rick Riordan with Percy Jackson and the the Zeus gods or the Greek gods, or Harry Potter, or like The Giver, which was a I forget what the award it won for the children's author award.
I've had to read The Giver in not high school, but in grade school.
You read The Giver in grade school?
Yeah, it was we like required, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I definitely do think that like there is a certain value that is gained from like English courses right now in high school. It just happens to be that most of the time would be better utilized probably for something else. And a lot of the unfortunately like the focus when they tend to like focus on like writing papers and like correcting your grammar, the kids don't really retain it if they don't have like a motivation to actually produce the material in the first place. Like,
Right, it'd be quite a bit different if you could send students overseas or like to a different country where they could be immersed and learn it for 6 months, and
yeah,
then that's so different than once a day in a classroom where maybe half the time you're not even paying attention and you're not even learning about the culture that much. You're
right.
mostly learning like language structure, which I think is valuable to even learning your own language.
Yeah, I mean, Christina, like when she was taking her Spanish classes in high school, she said that like she didn't even know why she was like taking English because honestly, when she was in high school and learning Spanish, she learned more about her own language than she actually did about Spanish, which I think is pretty accurate. Like when you have a sort of contrast and comparison to work with, I think that you can get a lot out of like your own language, whether or not you're going to learn German or Chinese or Japanese or Russian or whatever.
Oh yeah, I learned like I didn't understand conjugation or why certain parts of the language were important until I took Spanish. But I have no Spanish fluency at all.
Right. Have you thought about like doing something like the Duolingo or whatever it is?
Duolingo, I think it's called.
Duolingo. Yeah.
Not really. I would prefer to know where I'm going to be going and learn it there. A lot of places speak English already, and so it would be like a stepping stone to, you know, if I go to Canada, they have English and French, so I might have some French speakers that I would get to know. Or if you go to lots of places in Europe, like we were talking about last time, it's a stepping stone to like a bunch of different countries, and a lot of them know English because it's like you said, the one of the dominant languages.
Yeah, I don't know. They're like if you I mean that's one of the common problems that like the French will have is that they'll have, English speakers come visit France and expect them to speak English when they're just like, no, I mean, like, if you're going to come visit us or live here, we would prefer it if you would not just simply arrogantly assume that I should be the one to basically make the compromise.
I'm not. I don't want. Let me be clear about that. I don't want to expect that. I would probably try to go to an area where I knew they already did speak English. I would not, and like I would want to learn it.
You're just going to frustrate the natives into speaking English after you butcher their own language for 10 minutes.
Yeah, sure. Because it'll only be for as long as I don't learn it. So as soon as I start to learn it and get better at it, it'd be fine. But yeah, I'll put people through a little torture. Why not?
It's like good. It's good for them, really.
It is good for them. Yeah, that's like one thing that I think could be kind of difficult if you move to another country is making friends or making like I don't know people especially if you don't know the language. I have that problem now. Like I don't. It's after college. It's really difficult to meet new people.
Yeah, just casually come in contact with them when you have common interests. Well, I've done sort of things like meetup and stuff like that, but it can seem very forced when you're just like, okay, well, I want to go talk with history, so I'm going to go to a history meetup group and just like sit down and just be the awkward newcomer and stuff like that.
Only you would come up with history meetup group because that sounds boring to me. That sounds so terrible. I do not want to go to a history meetup group.
Well, they have book clubs too. Unfortunately, like every experience I've ever had with a book club has been terrible because it's like I just don't want to read what they want to read. And it's so weird. Like you'd think that it would be very easy to find like a sci-fi fantasy like book club that was not going to be reading like something like Twilight or something. Uh,
Oh, no. What? How many book clubs have you been to, and how many times have you been forced to read Twilight?
no, I'm just saying is that like okay, so I've been to like three different book clubs, and two of them were reading sort of like fictional mush, which was basically sort of a really terrible take on like I don't know how to explain it. Like one was about like this woman who had recently got a divorce and like she was gonna like make it into her new world, but after she got the divorce, like she was gonna like reconnect more with her kid who had like had already started their family and stuff like that. And it was just basically the story about this woman like in her life situation right there, right? But it was really not my sort of material where she didn't have the sort of personality as a character that where I was just like, okay, this is an intriguing person or what she's doing with this person. It was basically just talking about someone's life experiences, and I just didn't really get very much out of it. And so like, and
And it was a sci-fi.
no, it was a regular book club. The sci-fi book
Uh,
club I was reading another sort of urban fantasy, basically. And if for
mm,
those who are not familiar with the genre, urban fantasies are basically something where, like, you have vampires, werewolves, or some other magical sort of thing going on as in today. So usually it's like it's an alternate history where, magic is amongst us in the cities of New York or Boston or whatever, something similar to like the Dresden Files, or it's sort of hidden from group, like in the Twilight novels, like the idea that vampires are it's a hidden information that not everybody knows of. But because the genre has seen such an uptick and people interested in the series, the supply has not necessarily been of the highest quality.
right. So you get bad literature.
Yeah, you get some really just terrible stuff. And of course, the book club that I went to on that particular time had just got done reading Ender's Game, which is wonderful, which I wouldn't mind rereading. But like the previous three books before that were like books I were not interested in. The next two books that they were going to read were also basically urban fantasy mush that I was just like,
So you're like, I think I'm gonna pass.
yeah. So it was just like, oh man, like
I'm pretty sure you've read more fantasy than anybody I've ever met. You have a huge, I would consider it a pretty big collection of fantasy, mostly fantasy, but also sci-fi books.
I've probably read if you walk into a Barnes and Noble and you look at the fantasy sci-fi shelves, I've probably read between one fourth or one third of whatever's on the shelves.
Yeah.
And my own collection is like probably half of what I've read because I went, during college I didn't have the money to like basically buy a book and keep it forever. And
Right, you selling it back and now you're keeping it.
well, no, I just went to the libraries.
Oh, okay. Well, are you planning on selling back? You have so many books. Like, what are you gonna sell back? Like any of them that you wouldn't reread?
Yeah, I've thought about it. It's really difficult for me because like I do like to have it as a testament of like even as an example of like what I think are bad books,
Mm-hmm.
or to talk about, because a lot of people also have this thing, and I don't have it, where if they start a book, they have to finish it. They feel compelled that like they've already invested time into it, and they want to know like, you know,
I've had this issue actually with myself. If I start a book, I really want to finish it. It just like then I can give the book a fair like judgment of I thought this book was not great, or I thought this book was okay, or I thought this book was good. Most of the time, if it's good, like I'm not going to notice and I'll read all of it anyway. But yeah, it's really hard for me to just put something down and give up on it. But yeah, Maggie does that all the time. She'll like read 4 chapters and be like, this isn't for me.
Yeah, I actually think that like there's a very high value to the fact that being able to put a book down because it means that you're not going to spend, for me, it's a very tedious process to like drag through a book that I'm like not engaged with. Like I will spend if I'm reading like a book I don't like, it will take me months to finish. And it just like I could have if I meanwhile like even a book that I think is kind of okay. It might take me 2 weeks to a month to finish, like
Mm-hmm.
depending on like how busy I am with my other, life obligations. But if you get a really awesome book, snap, that thing's gone like in a day or 2 days. And it's just like how many more potentially interesting books and material could you have read in that time? Because I've literally tried to like read books that like have taken me months and months and months and months, and I'm just like it's not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like there's so much better use for your time and stuff like that. And it's also one of those things where like I think legitimately if you can put a book down and said, you know what, after 4 chapters it didn't engage me, that's the fact and that's the truth, and it doesn't necessarily say anything bad about the book because like I think that a lot of different books have different people who different audiences and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, just as far as spending your time wisely, I think it's definitely a skill to be able to put it down and say, you know what, I'm going to move on.
Yeah, and it's definitely something I've become more aware of after, you know,
Living with
being
Maggie.
living with Maggie and being around her all the time is that she doesn't really have any shame about that, and she'll just be like, "Yeah, I'm not reading this anymore."
Yeah, there's nothing to be ashamed of. I think that if you're really going to, like you said, there's a legitimate kind of thing. Is like, if you don't know all the story, how do you know whether or not it's going to be a good one? That sort of thing. And like there's the same is similar for like TV shows, like where Lost seemed like a pretty good show up until like the final episode. Like a lot of people were really upset about that, right? So it's just like you might have like a really good book that you've finished, like, and we've actually had discussions. I don't remember a book, for instance, but we're like an alternative ending would have been, I think, more beneficial to that particular book, right? We've had that sort of discussions, but so I think there is a legitimate thing where you're like, yeah, you can't necessarily give it a fair review, but I think that you can give it honest review if you say, I read 150 pages and
Yeah, and it was not any good.
or just saying like basically saying the reasons that it didn't catch you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that like I've thought about this, like if I ever had to like go get a job like at a bookstore or something, like what would I say? I'd probably say that like there probably are no real bad books in a bookstore. There's only books that I are not really for me. There's someone out there who's going to be an audience who are really going to enjoy that. That's a book for them. And that's what I say to people who are non-readers. I'm just like, you may know you're a non-reader, but let me tell you, there's like millions and millions of books and they've been written by different sorts of people. So there's going to be a book for you. Somewhere out there, there's a book for you. I might hate it. I might only read 2 pages of it and be like, this is bullshit. I'm putting it down. But it might be your book.
Yeah, I would agree that like that there's there is a book out there for everybody, but every book being valuable, I have a little bit of a problem with. I want to bring up Twilight as an example.
Oh no, Twilight is a great example of like how that book, even a book as badly as written as Twilight, has value.
Yeah, I don't. I hate to admit that because it's so bad. It's so terrible. It's such a waste of pop
Okay,
culture and
well, let's bring up. This is the whole reason we decided to talk a little bit about assumptions on the first episode is because we're going to go back and use your why is Harry Potter impactful to you? And it's because it has certain themes that are very connective to the human condition, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to look at something that's as widely popular as Twilight or something similar like that, or even like Tolkien, which I am not really actually a big fan of Tolkien, which is it surprises most people when I learn when I'm like a fantasy junkie and sci-fi junkie. They're just like, you don't like Tolkien, and I'm just like, no, I hate Tolkien. But anyway, um,
You're gonna get some hate for that.
I know
Like it.
some people are going to be like, no, you have to
What?
talk about that now. But like for Twilight, for instance, in the Harry Potter, like what does Twilight have in connection to Harry Potter have in connection to
Twilight.
Twilight? And it's the fact that there is a theme that connects with the human condition that is very important to people, and that's why it sold a million copies. That's why it became a trend-setting, gigantic pop culture phenomenon. And
Just
it's important to be able to pick out what those themes are to understand this value, and also separate it and be like, you know what? Even though Twilight is widely popular, even though that I personally enjoyed the book, like it's not a good book. Like you need to be able to say that you enjoyed a book and it's not a good book. Like that's you need to be able to like discern that so that you can say I understand why it was popular. Like I really enjoyed it, my personally, but I understand that the writing is terrible and the characters are paper cutouts of people.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Twilight. I regret that I've read them all.
No, I think it's like a valuable learning experience. It sets the bar of what you would consider to be your low end of
Of fantasy and
right, right.
yeah.
I'd actually probably what's funny is like if you were to like rate it, you know, rating 1 to 10, 10 being like the pinnacle of book reading that
Like the
people
best
should
book ever.
the best book ever, like everyone should read it so they can understand what a good book is, and one being like I don't really condone book burning, but this would make better blog fire, than book material. I still think that like in five is the middle of the road where you're basically like I think I can recommend this. Like it's not really
Right? It's
good
just
or anything like that, but I can basically say it was worth a read, and
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm.
enjoyed it enough to like thing. And four is like, it was borderline, and I don't really think it's worth a read. I think I'd definitely give Twilight probably a 5 or a 6. Like I think it is worth a read. I don't
No,
being
no,
7 being worth a reread and 8 being definitely reread it.
no, no. Twilight is not a five.
No, it's worth it.
What? It is not worth reading.
Okay,
No.
let's talk about some of those
Oh my
themes that make.
gosh.
Let's talk about some of those themes that make Twilight like a
Okay,
valuable
so here's
experience.
what I think. It's basically romance. It's so for girls, you get like the most caring, perfect guy. He's totally in love with you, right?
I would say sensitive.
Sensitive. Okay, fine. He's sensitive. And okay, but then you kind of have the bad boy, the werewolf boy, right? He's like trouble. He's like edgy. Okay.
He
So
personifies individualism, I think.
okay. Wow. I could tell you've thought about this before. So
Yeah, I have a thing for the werewolf man. Oh yeah.
a shirtless werewolf man.
Oh yeah.
So
Uh,
and then you've got okay, so that's like what a girl gets out of it. Also, girl's main character, which I'm all for, but not for a character that is so shallow. Okay, and then for the guys, you have the superhero story, right? You have like awesome powers and like kind of like magical elements, and you've got mystery or intrigue, which could appeal to anybody with the vampire government type thing. So I understand why it's liked, but that doesn't make it good. That does not make it worth reading.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't make it good. But what makes it worth reading is the idea that you can make a concept between what I think what the themes would be simply stated was like one of those sort of classical gender roles that's perpetuated so heavily
Hmm.
in Western culture as to make it almost a dominant universal sort of thing, which is almost instilled into anybody who's like 5 or older, which is that the Twilight personification really is that every girl wants to be a fairy princess and every little boy wants to be a Marvel superhero, you know.
I don't, and that's why I would say it's not worth reading, is because I don't want to perpetuate those stereotypes.
No, but I think it's actually very valuable at identifying the stereotypes. That's why it's popular, and that's if you read it and you have sort of a guilty pleasure sort of thing that you too secretly have a superhero complex, or you too have a fairy princess complex, and it's one of those things where like if you've read this book and you've gained a great deal of enjoyment out of what would be a terrible book, then you have that says something about you psychologically that you probably need to be aware of is that you have sort of a minor complex and that it can definitely sort of run your subconscious when you think about like whether or not you feel entitled to attention, which is like one of the problems that a lot of people complained about Twilight is that they felt that it built false expectations between relationships for women versus boys,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
like what they would actually deserve. And I think that that's a legitimate case if you're looking at what if everybody what if all the women who just absolutely adore Twilight are walking around with fairy princess complexes?
Hmm. I would admit, okay, so I don't really believe in the guilty pleasure. I think you should take pleasure in things. I think you should enjoy them while you enjoy them. But I have to say, I read Twilight and I enjoyed parts of it. I'm a little bit of a guilty pleasure there. It's a little bit of a guilty pleasure there. I I enjoyed parts of it, but overall, really, really just disappointed and a little grossed out. So I don't know.
What was gross about it?
The stereotypes and the lack of personality that was in the characters.
Yeah, the lack of personality definitely is very suffering. It's like they're definitely going for an archetype of male, female. It's like so heavily gender role based that it's like, yeah, it's almost hard to witness the character interactions.
Yeah, I want to I want to point out that Harry Potter's done a lot more for the world than, than that. Even it being a popular fantasy book.
So the themes are like way more important, right? Talking about prejudice and corruption and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and like has inspired real life people like the Harry Potter Alliance have done. Like
Yeah,
they're a
yeah.
real nonprofit that have done
That's
like
that's
campaigns and
that's one of the nice things about sort of like the internet culture that is a little bit more prominent. Like obviously things like community project groups, like something like the Peace Corps, have been around a long time and made a real significant impact. Or Doctors Without Borders is like a real definite thing as well. But they've the whole internet culture, like the Project for Awesome, run by like the Vlog brothers, Hank and John Green, and uh, people who are using community and pop culture associations to basically try to make the world a better place is sort of an emergent thing. I mean, it's not like all the people who in the '80s were infatuated with Madonna and the Go Go's and like
we're
necessarily.
donating money because of them.
Right. No, I mean they had like one popular concert like that like comes off my head is like when like Phil Collins, Michael Jackson, and all like the people like Queen got together for like Live Aid and stuff like that. So there was definitely pop culture movements that were geared towards making the world a better place. But it's more. I think it's a greater focus right now in sort of the internet culture community.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's really important, and I think it's like an awesome change.
Although what I would say is that like when they talk about like the greatest generation like from like the 1940s and 1950s in order to bring like the okay, so the reason they call it the greatest generation is because you basically had all of these people that had really made a great sacrifice to try to serve their country in World War II, and then they kind of came home and really launched sort of the manufacturing base and the consumerism base that would make United States such a economic powerhouse in the later 20th century.
World War II again. Yeah, all right.
World War II, yeah,
It's important.
it's important. So they tend to talk about the people that basically came home from World War II, and launched the baby boomer sort of trend and everything like that as the greatest generation. It's just like a label, right?
Yeah, a
Um,
terrible label.
uh, it's just like everybody has their good qualities and everything like that. But what's important is that like they did really band together to serve sort of an American ideal,
Hmm.
like a lot of them. And of course, any time that you're going to assert foreign policy with some sort of idealism, it's going to fall short.
I'm hoping we will see a big change like that with the internet age, and basically what I would call the Harry Potter generation is, people being focused about decreasing world suck and
Well, it seems it's a cyclic thing, in at least in American culture. If you look back, like on sort of social interventionist policy of the Woodrow Wilson era, and then the sort of counterculture with like the flappers and everything like that, where basically they were trying to like overthrow sort of social taboos. And then
Mhm.
after World War II, you had like definitely like sort of a community thing with like the USO and a lot of uh, like the Red Cross and basically help organizations like that was like the rise of the Peace Corps and stuff like that, and then like the even like the sort of social revolution of the 60s and things like that.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
it tends to be that like every 30 to 40 years you have like a sort of emergent culture that is like really trying to bring social change, and sadly I think the 70s and the 80s and 90s weren't really that sort of thing, and really I don't think the early 2000s were, but
So we're overdue.
I think we're a little bit overdue, and I think that the internet culture is making really large trends. Like if you see people who are something like Elon Musk, who are like really making like corporate changing corporate policy due to like the idea of making the world a better place under sort of a profitable visionary corporate structure.
Yeah, yeah.
When he's like running SpaceX and Tesla, and like he's investing into solar energy and things like that. Like I think those are going to be like sort of the new heroes of the next day. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and I actually think that this is partially caused by the internet being free and open information. When you allow
Yeah.
information to not be, edited so much by media or like the companies.
Yeah, it's not serving some sort of political agenda or spin or something like that, and it becomes much more human, and everybody becomes a global citizen. Yeah.
Right, and I think the state of reality becomes easier to see.
Yeah. I mean, if you like, there's really a lot of interesting things like on the internet right now, where you have Kiva, which are is a online, basically social loaning program where you can give money to people who have like entrepreneurial dreams or something like that, and they can basically improve their life through prosperity, or and I have problems with Kiva, but and other sort of loan programs right now, but their intentions are kind of good.
Right, I think they are.
And then you have, Kickstarter, which is like you're going to avoid the sort of old style venture capital corporate systems where people would buy up copyrights and sort of force you to follow the company line. And now it gives gives new entrepreneurs or transcenders or innovators, the financial capital to basically, launch projects. And you're getting like way more interesting sort of creations that haven't been like looked at by some like large corporation
Right,
like.
and it's not a question of will this sell to the general populace. It's is there a group
market for
right?
it.
Is there a market for it at all? Because if
Yeah,
somebody
they're not looking at like market size and saying, well, no, this isn't going to reach a market of 1 million people, so we're not going to sponsor it. It's like if you can basically get off the ground with a market of 10,000, if that's all you need, if that's your Kickstarter project, or you even have one person who can meet your Kickstarter goal of like, $10,000 or $50,000, then you can make it happen.
all right, I think we can wrap this up.
Okay.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the internet has a lot of value to our society, and I think we could definitely talk about that in a future episode.
Okay. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening, guys.
This has been a Gravity Well podcast. Thank you for listening and have a lovely day. We'll see you next time.